Ethan Walker slammed his fist through the drywall of his own kitchen at 1:47 in the morning, and the only witness was his 7-year-old daughter standing in the hallway in her pajamas holding her bear, staring at him like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. He saw her face. And that was the moment everything inside him broke open. He yanked his bleeding hand out of the wall, grabbed his coat off the floor, scooped Sophie up without a word, and walked out into a snowstorm with nowhere to go and no one left to call. Except he ended up on her street. The woman he'd spoken maybe 20 words to his entire life. The one with the light always burning in her window. And what happened when he knocked on that door would destroy every wall he'd built, including the ones inside his chest. What city are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. If you're new here, hit subscribe. You don't want to miss what he says to her before sunrise. The knock came at 2:17 in the morning. Olivia knew the exact time because she had been awake. She was always awake at that hour, the kind of sleeplessness that didn't announce itself but simply arrived quiet and familiar, like an old tenant who knew where the spare key was hidden. She'd been sitting at her kitchen table with a half-eaten slice of her own chocolate cake and a mug of tea gone cold, going over receipts for the bakery. Numbers had always been easier than feelings. Numbers didn't look at you a certain way. Numbers didn't make you feel like you were taking up too much space. The knock came again, harder this time. Olivia pushed her chair back slowly. In Cedar Falls, Colorado, population just under 4,000. Nobody knocked on your door at 2 a.m. with good news. She pulled her robe tighter around herself and padded toward the front door. The old hardwood floor groaning under her feet, the way it always did in winter when the cold got into the bones of the house, the same way it got into the bones of the people living in it. She looked through the peephole, and for a moment, she genuinely thought she was dreaming. Because standing on her front porch, lit up by the single yellow bulb she always left on, the one her mother had told her to keep burning, just in case Livy, just in case, was Ethan Walker. She hadn't spoken more than 20 words to the man in the last 2 years. But she knew him. Everybody in Cedar Falls knew Ethan Walker. He was the former fire captain who had pulled a family of 4 from a burning house on Route 9 back in 2019. He was the man who organized the town's Thanksgiving food drive 3 years running. He was the single father who could be spotted every Saturday morning at the park on Maple Street pushing his daughter Sophie on the swings, while looking like a man who was slowly learning to exist in a world he no longer fully recognized. He was broad-shouldered and quiet, and had the kind of face that made older men nod in respect when he walked past them on the street. But the man standing on Olivia's porch right now was not that man. This man was bleeding from a cut above his left eyebrow. His coat was open despite the temperature being well below freezing, and there was snow collecting on his shoulders, like he'd been standing outside for a long time before he'd found the nerve to knock. His eyes, dark brown, she could see that even in the dim light, were glassy and unfocused in the particular way that told her he had been drinking. Not casually, not socially. The kind of drinking a man does when he is trying to get somewhere far away inside his own head and can't find the road. And behind him, half hidden by his body, pressing her small face into the back of his coat, was Sophie. 7 years old. Dark curls. Holding a stuffed bear so old and worn that one of its glass eyes had been replaced with a mismatched button. And crying so quietly, it was somehow worse than if she'd been screaming. Olivia's hand was already on the deadbolt before she'd made a conscious decision to open the door. The cold hit her like a wall. "Ethan!" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "What happened?" He looked at her. And the thing that would stay with her, the thing she would think about long after that night in the weeks and months that followed, was not the blood or the smell of whiskey, or even the state of his coat. It was his eyes. Because behind the glaze of whatever he'd been drinking, behind the exhaustion and the pain, there was something else. He was terrified. A man like Ethan Walker terrified. "I didn't—" He stopped, swallowed hard. His jaw worked like he was chewing on a word he didn't know how to spit out. "I didn't know where else to go." Sophie's fingers tightened in the back of his coat. Olivia stepped back from the doorway. "Come inside." She got Sophie settled first. That was the instinct: ignore the complicated man, take care of the child. She led Sophie to the couch in the living room, wrapped her in the heavy quilt her grandmother had made, the one with the blue and cream squares that she'd always thought was too nice to actually use, but kept folded over the back of the couch because it looked warm, and she liked the way it looked warm. "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" Olivia asked, crouching down so she was at eye level with the girl. Sophie stared at her. Big eyes, her father's eyes still wet at the edges. She shook her head once. "Okay." Olivia kept her voice low and even. "That's okay. Do you want some hot chocolate?" A pause. Then the tiniest nod. "I can do that." Olivia straightened up. "You stay right here. I'll be back in 2 minutes, all right? You can hold on to Mr. She gestured toward the bear. "Gerald," Sophie said. It was the first word the child had spoken since they arrived, and it came out like something fragile. "You can hold on to Gerald." Olivia said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Gerald looks like he's been through some things too. He'll keep you company." Something shifted in Sophie's face. Not quite a smile, but the muscles around her mouth softened just slightly, and that was enough. Olivia went into the kitchen. Ethan was already there, standing at the sink, with the faucet running cold, pressing a dish towel to the cut above his eye. He hadn't asked permission to use her sink. He'd just done it, like a man who had run out of the kind of energy required to ask for things. "Sit down," Olivia said quietly. "Please." He looked at her. Didn't argue. He pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down heavily, the kind of sit that makes a chair scrape back 2 inches across the floor. Olivia put the milk on for Sophie's hot chocolate first. Then she opened the cabinet under the sink, found the first aid kit she kept there. She'd grown up with a mother who believed in being prepared, and some habits stuck, and set it on the table. She pulled out antiseptic and a packet of butterfly bandages. "This is going to sting," she said. "I know." His voice was rough, lower than she'd remembered it from the handful of times she'd heard it at town meetings or across the counter at her bakery when he'd come in with Sophie for a birthday cake order the previous spring. She tilted his chin up gently with 2 fingers and looked at the cut. Not deep enough for stitches, but it had bled well. Head wounds always did. "How did this happen?" Silence. "Ethan." She kept her voice the way she kept it with Sophie, low, unhurried. "I'm going to be putting things on your face. I think you can tell me how it got this way." He exhaled. A long, defeated sound. "I was at Harley's." Harley's was the bar on the edge of town, the kind of place that had been there so long it had become invisible to people who didn't need it, and necessary to people who did. He stopped again. "Take your time. There was a guy." His jaw tightened. Someone said something. About Rebecca. Rebecca, his wife. Dead 3 years now from an aneurysm that came out of nowhere on a Tuesday afternoon in November. Olivia remembered the funeral. She hadn't known the family well enough to attend, but she remembered the way the whole town had gone quiet for a week. What did he say? It doesn't matter what he said. Okay. She pressed the antiseptic carefully to the cut. He flinched, but didn't pull back. And Sophie. Why was Sophie at the bar? She wasn't. His voice tightened in a way that told her this part was the piece that was breaking him open from the inside. She was at home, with the sitter. But the sitter, Linda the Pearson girl. She had a family thing, some emergency, and she called me and I wasn't picking up because He stopped, pressed his lips together. Because I was drinking. And by the time I saw the missed calls, Linda had already gone and Sophie was alone. For an hour and a half. The kitchen was very quiet. The milk was starting to steam on the stove. She called you? Olivia asked carefully. 8 times. He said it the way you'd say a number that had been burned into you. 8 times. I was sitting 20 feet away from my phone not picking up, and my daughter was alone in that house calling me 8 times. Olivia turned to the stove to finish the hot chocolate. She needed a moment to look somewhere else, because the expression on his face was the kind of thing that felt private, the kind of pain that deserved a little room. She poured the hot chocolate into a mug she kept for exactly this kind of night, wide and solid. The kind of mug that felt like something when you wrapped both hands around it. She added 2 mini marshmallows from the bag she kept in the cupboard, because sometimes she needed the reminder that small sweet things still existed. "I'll take this to her," she said. "And then you're going to drink some water and tell me what else happened." Sophie was asleep within 20 minutes of finishing the hot chocolate. Children that age, when they crash completely like a power outage. One moment she was awake, the bear tucked under her chin watching Olivia with those careful measuring eyes. And then she was simply gone. Her breathing deep and even, the quilt pulled up to her nose. Olivia sat with her until she was sure. Then she went back to the kitchen. Ethan had not moved from the chair. He had at some point poured himself a glass of water from the tap. That was something she supposed. The butterfly bandages were holding the cut together. He looked like a man who had been very slowly emptied out and then left to figure out what to do with all that empty space. Olivia made herself a fresh cup of tea. She set the kettle back down and leaned against the counter and looked at him. "She okay?" he asked. "She's asleep." Something in his shoulders went slack with relief, then immediately tensed again, like he didn't feel he'd earned the relief. "I can't believe I—" He shook his head. "An hour and a half, Olivia." It was the first time he'd used her name. She noticed it the way you notice something small that shouldn't matter, but does. "Kids are more resilient than we think," she said. It was not a dismissal. She said it carefully, meaning it. "She's 7. His voice cracked on the number. Just slightly. Just enough. "She's 7 years old, and her mother's gone, and her father was drunk in a bar getting into fights, and she was sitting by herself in the dark, calling me Ethan." Olivia said it quietly, firmly, the way you say a name when someone is about to slide somewhere they can't come back from easily. "She's safe now. She's asleep on my couch. She drank her hot chocolate, and she held Gerald, and she's safe." He looked at her. His eyes were clearing slightly. The whiskey losing ground to cold air and water, and the particular clarity that comes from a crisis that ends. "Why did you let us in?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. "What?" "It's the middle of the night. You don't really know me. You could have called. Someone called the police, told me to go to—" He stopped. "I knocked on your door, like I had some right to. I don't know why I came here." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I was walking. After I got Sophie. I was just walking. And I ended up on your street, and there was a light on." He looked at the window toward the small lamp she kept burning in the front room. "You had a light on." "I always keep a light on," Olivia said. He nodded slowly, like that explained something larger than the light. "You didn't answer the question," he said. "Why did you let us in?" Olivia thought about it for a moment. The real answer. Not the polite one, not the one that made it simple and charitable. "Because you had a 7-year-old with you who'd been crying," she said. "And because you looked like a man who needed someone to open a door before he could ask why." Ethan stared at her for a long moment. "I need to sleep this off," he said finally. "And then in the morning, I'll get Sophie, and we'll get out of your—" "My guest room has a bed," Olivia said, "and a floor space where Sophie can have the extra air mattress. You're not driving anywhere tonight." "Olivia, it's 2:30 in the morning and it's 17 degrees outside and the roads are ice." She picked up her mug of tea. "I'm going to go change the sheets. You drink that water." She walked out of the kitchen before he could argue. She changed the guest room sheets by muscle memory in the dark, not wanting to flip on too many lights and risk waking Sophie. Cotton the good ones her mother had given her, the ones she only put out for guests. And wasn't it something she thought that the first time she'd had a real guest in close to a year, it was Ethan Walker and his daughter. She found the air mattress in the hall closet, the little handheld pump, the spare pillow she'd been meaning to donate. She set it all up on the floor beside the guest bed without making much noise. When she came back out to the living room, she checked on Sophie, still asleep. She tucked the quilt a little tighter, adjusted the pillow. Gerald the bear was pressed against the little girl's chin, and Sophie's breathing was slow and deep and completely unafraid in the way only children, and the very innocent can be. "You're going to be okay, little girl," Olivia thought. She didn't say it out loud, but she thought it hard enough that it felt like something she was giving the child, like a small, invisible gift pressed into the air between them. She went back to the kitchen. Ethan had drunk the water. He was sitting with both hands flat on the table, staring at them like they were objects he was trying to identify. "Guest room's ready," she said. "Sophie can sleep on the air mattress next to you." He looked up. "Thank you." He said it slowly, like the words had weight. Not the reflexive kind of thank you that came automatically. The real kind. "I mean it. I know you do." He pushed up from the chair. He was a large man she'd forgotten. In the abstract, exactly how large, broad across the chest and shoulders, the kind of build that came from years of actual physical work rather than a gym. He looked strange in her small kitchen. And also in some way she wasn't going to examine too carefully at 2:30 in the morning. He looked like he belonged there in a way she couldn't name. She told herself it was just the exhaustion making her soft. "Olivia." He stopped in the kitchen doorway, his hand on the frame. "Yeah." He turned back to look at her. And what she saw in his face, she didn't have a word for it, not then. It wasn't gratitude exactly. It was something older and more complicated than gratitude. Something that had been sitting in storage for a long time. "I remember your cake," he said. "From Sophie's birthday, last April. She wanted the strawberry lemon one." He paused. "It was the best thing we'd eaten in a long time." She didn't know what to do with that, so she just nodded. "Get some sleep." He went. And Olivia stood in her kitchen in the dark for a long moment, listening to the house settle around her, and she thought, what just happened? Then she turned off the lights and went to bed. And did not sleep at all. In the morning, Olivia was up by 6. She had her routine, the same one she'd had for the last 4 years, since she'd opened the bakery up at 6 coffee by 6:15, at the shop by 7, to start the first proofing of the bread dough, before her one employee, Carla, arrived at 8. The routine was the foundation under everything else. When your personal life was quiet, and Olivia's was by nearly any measurement quiet, you built your architecture out of the things that were certain. But this morning she was halfway through her first cup of coffee when a small voice came from the hallway. "You have a really big cat." Olivia turned. Sophie was standing in the kitchen doorway, hair wild from sleep, Gerald dangling from one hand. She was looking at Butterscotch, Olivia's 12-pound orange tabby, who was sitting on the kitchen counter with the particular imperious calm of a cat who had decided long ago that all rules were suggestions. "That's Butterscotch," Olivia said. "He thinks he owns the place." "Does he bite?" "Only strangers." Sophie's brow furrowed. "We're strangers." "You were," Olivia said. She pushed out a kitchen chair with her foot an invitation. "Butterscotch already decided you're not anymore. That's how he works. Sit down. I'm making eggs." "Do you like eggs?" Sophie climbed up into the chair. She put Gerald on the table and folded her hands in front of her in a way that was so adult and deliberate it pulled something in Olivia's chest. Like the child had been practicing being polite for so long, it had become automatic. "Yes, please," Sophie said. "Scrambled if that's okay." "With cheese." "Scrambled with cheese," Olivia said. "Good choice." She was cracking the eggs when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavier ones. Ethan appeared in the doorway. He looked like he'd slept hard and woken up embarrassed. He was wearing the same clothes, his face unshaved, the butterfly bandage still in place, but starting to lift at one corner. He looked at his daughter first, a quick, thorough look that ran from her head to her feet and back, and something in him visibly settled when he confirmed she was okay. Then he looked at Olivia. "You didn't have to—" he started. "Scrambled eggs with cheese," Olivia said without turning from the stove. "Coffee's on the counter. Help yourself." A pause. "Dad," Sophie said in the tone of a child who has decided the adults are being slow. "Sit down. She has a big cat. His name is Butterscotch. Ethan sat down. He poured himself coffee in the mug she'd set out. He was quiet in the way that felt different from last night's quiet. This one was careful. Sober. He was a man taking stock of himself and not entirely liking the inventory. "Sophie," he said, "did you say thank you to Ms. Bennett for—" "Olivia." Olivia said mildly, sliding the eggs onto a plate. "Just Olivia is fine." "Olivia," he repeated, like he was trying the word out. "Did you say thank you?" "Not yet," Sophie said honestly. "Sophie." "Thank you, Olivia," Sophie said immediately, and then with the devastating sincerity of a 7-year-old, "You have really nice blankets." "My grandma made that quilt," Olivia said, setting the plate in front of Sophie. "She always said a cold person needs 3 things: something warm to drink, something warm to eat, and something warm to sleep under." Sophie considered this with great seriousness. "That's 4 things," she said, pointing at the eggs and the mug of hot chocolate. Olivia slid across the table toward her. "Hot chocolate is warm to drink, and eggs are warm to eat." "You're good at math," Olivia said. "I'm the best in my class at math," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "Not bragging, just reporting facts." "Except for Tyler Reyes, but he cheats." Ethan made a sound that was almost a laugh. It was so unexpected that Olivia looked over at him. He was looking at his daughter with an expression that was so full of love and pain, and something that looked like grief it was almost hard to witness. He caught Olivia looking and cleared his throat. "I'll pay you back," he said, "for the food, for the room." He set down his mug and leaned forward, elbows on the table. I know I put you in a strange position. I'm sorry for that." "You don't need to apologize for needing help," Olivia said. "You didn't have to open the door." "No," she agreed. "I didn't." He looked at her steadily. That look again, the one she didn't have a word for. "Most people wouldn't have. I'm not most people." She said it simply, not defensively, not with any particular edge. Just as a statement of fact. She had learned somewhere in her 34 years that the most quiet truth was often the most powerful kind. Ethan didn't say anything for a moment. He looked at her. Really looked the kind of looking that wasn't just surface, and she resisted the urge to pull her robe tighter, to shift her weight, to do any of the 1,000 small things she usually did to make herself smaller when someone's attention landed on her. She stood still. She let him look. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. "You can ask." "Did you know before last night? Did you know who I was, past the name?" "A little," she said honestly. "I know you lost your wife 3 years ago. I know you coached Sophie's soccer team in the fall." She paused. "I know your daughter really wanted the strawberry lemon cake for her birthday. She had me put 7 butterflies on it because she said butterflies were her mom's favorite." Something moved across his face at that, fast and raw. "I didn't know you remembered that," he said quietly. "I remember everyone's cake orders," Olivia said. "It's a professional habit." He nodded slowly. "I feel like—" He stopped, rubbed the side of his jaw with one hand. "I feel like I should have known more about you than I did. Before last night." "Why would you have?" she said. "You had other things to think about." "That's not an excuse." She looked at him. "I didn't say it was." Sophie had finished her eggs and was now holding a small piece of scrambled egg out toward Butterscotch, who was approaching from the counter with the deliberate gravity of an animal who refuses to look eager but absolutely is. "Dad," Sophie said, "can we stay for a little while?" The kitchen went very quiet. Ethan looked at Olivia. Olivia looked at Ethan. In the space between them was a question neither of them was ready to say out loud. "We shouldn't impose," he said carefully. "You're not," Olivia said, just as carefully. "I need to figure out—" He stopped, pressed his hand flat on the table. "There's some things I need to deal with, back at the house, bills, some other—" He shook his head, a small controlled motion like he was shutting a door on something. I just need a day or two to get my head straight." Olivia looked at Sophie, who was now watching her with those careful, waiting eyes. "A day or two," Olivia said. "The guest room is yours." He went back to his house that afternoon alone to get clean clothes for himself and Sophie. Sophie stayed with Olivia. It was the most natural thing in the world, and also, if Olivia was being honest with herself, completely terrifying. She didn't have children. She didn't have a husband. She didn't have anything in her house designed for a 7-year-old, except apparently a cat with a talent for choosing friends and a grandmother's quilt and the ability to make good scrambled eggs. But Sophie was easy in a way that surprised her. She didn't demand attention. She just occupied space. She sat at the kitchen table with a coloring book she'd had in her backpack and colored with a focus that was almost meditative. She fed pieces of her lunch to Butterscotch with great ceremony and informed him very seriously that he was her friend now, and she expected him to act accordingly. She asked Olivia what kind of cakes were her favorite to make, and when Olivia said, "Honestly, the ones that nobody expects to be beautiful," Sophie had nodded solemnly and said, "Those are the best surprises." Olivia had to turn toward the sink for a moment after that one. When Ethan came back 3 hours later, he looked different. He'd showered, changed, shaved. He was carrying a duffel bag and a paper bag from the grocery store, which he set on her kitchen counter without asking. "I bought groceries," he said. "If that's okay. I figured I should contribute something." Olivia looked at the bag. She saw pasta, tomatoes, garlic, a rotisserie chicken bread, and a large carton of milk. "You cook," she said. "I manage," he said. "Some things. Pasta would be good tonight." Pasta it is. He cooked dinner. She hadn't had someone cook in her kitchen in, she tried to remember, a long time. Her kitchen had always been the place where she cooked for others, packaged things for others, thought about what other people would enjoy eating. Having someone standing at her stove moving around her space with careful attention, asking where she kept the colander, it was disorienting in a way she hadn't been prepared for. Sophie set the table without being asked. She put out 3 plates and 3 forks and 3 glasses, and she put Gerald on the 4th chair, and she didn't explain, and nobody commented. They ate dinner. Olivia couldn't remember the last time her table had had more than one person at it. That night, after Sophie was in bed, Ethan found Olivia in her small back sunroom, the one that looked out over the yard, where snow was still coming down in slow, thoughtful flakes. She was sitting in the wicker chair, with her bookkeeping spread out on the coffee table, except she hadn't been looking at the numbers. She'd been looking at the snow. "Can I sit?" he asked. "Chair's right there." He sat. Not across from her, but in the other wicker chair beside her, so they were both facing the window and the dark yard and the falling snow. For a while, neither of them said anything. "I want to apologize," he said finally, "for last night. The real apology. Not the one where I say I'm sorry and you say it's fine and we both move on." "What's the real one?" she asked. "I showed up at your door drunk," he said. "In front of my daughter, in the middle of the night. I had no right to put you in that position." He looked at his hands. "I've been telling myself for 3 years that I've been holding it together. Doing okay. Being the dad Sophie needs." He paused. "Last night proved I've been lying to myself." "Holding it together and being okay aren't the same thing," Olivia said. "No," he said. "They're not." "What happened at Harley's?" she asked. "The thing the man said about Rebecca." A long silence. The snow kept falling. "He said she would have been ashamed of me," Ethan said, flat and quiet. "The way I've been living, closing myself off, not moving forward." He stopped. He wasn't wrong. He said it like it was meant to hurt, and it did, and the worst part is that it did because it's true. "What was she like?" Olivia asked. He looked over at her, surprised by the question, she thought. "Rebecca," he said, and just the name in his mouth had a different quality than any other word he'd said. She was loud. A small, involuntary smile. Not in an annoying way. She just took up room, you know. She'd walk into a party, and within 20 minutes, she'd know everybody's name and their kid's birthday and what their dog was afraid of. He shook his head. She was the kind of person who made you think the world was bigger than it actually was. She sounds wonderful, Olivia said. She was. He turned back to the window. And I've spent 3 years trying to be what she would have wanted for Sophie. Provider, protector, responsible. He exhaled. And 0 time being an actual person. You're allowed to be a person, Olivia said. Am I? He said it like a genuine question. She looked at him. Yeah, Ethan, you are. Your daughter doesn't need a bulletproof fortress with a pulse. She needs a dad who shows up. Last night was a bad night. Bad nights happen. He stared at her. Something in his expression shifted. You don't know me well enough to be this reasonable about it. Maybe not, she agreed. But I know what it looks like when someone's been carrying something by themselves for too long. She picked up her tea. It's a very specific kind of tired. Silence. You do it too, he said. Not accusatory, observational. She looked at him. Carry things alone, he said. I can tell. She didn't answer right away. Everybody does, she said finally. Some people are just better at looking like they don't. He nodded. Let that sit. Then, what made you open the bakery? It was such a left-turn question she almost laughed. What? You run a bakery by yourself in a small town, he said. That's not an accident, that's a choice. What made you do it? She thought about it. My grandmother, she said finally. She used to say food was the only honest language, that you couldn't lie with a meal made from scratch. It either tastes like something or it doesn't. She paused. She was the one who taught me to bake. When my dad left and my mom was working double shifts, my grandmother would have me in the kitchen every afternoon after school. And whatever was going wrong out there, she gestured vaguely at some invisible outside world. It couldn't reach us in there. It was ours. The bakery is yours, he said quietly. Yeah. She looked at the snow. It's mine. I think that's a braver thing than most people would recognize. She turned to look at him. It's just a bakery. It's not just a bakery. He said it with a certainty she didn't expect. It's the place you built when the world wasn't giving you what it was supposed to. That's not small. Olivia was quiet for a moment, and then she said very carefully, the thing she usually kept behind 3 locked doors. People don't usually see it that way. They see a woman who couldn't cut it in a bigger city running a small shop in a small town. Who told you that? He asked. Nobody had to tell me, she said. You just know, when people look at you a certain way, when the men you date choose someone else, when you stop getting invited to things because you make people... She stopped herself. Forget it. No, he said. His voice had gone quieter. What were you going to say? Because I make people uncomfortable, she said, flat and direct, years of practice making it sound matter-of-fact. I'm too big, too emotional, too much. Always something to something. Ethan was silent. She wished she could take it back. Too much honesty at 2 in the morning in a snow-lit room with a man she barely knew. You know what I noticed, he said finally. Last night, when Sophie couldn't stop crying, she stopped. When you wrapped her in that quilt, she just stopped. He turned to look at Olivia directly. You think that's an accident? Olivia didn't say anything. People who are too much, he said slowly. Don't make 7-year-olds stop crying with a quilt and a mug of hot chocolate and the right words in the right voice. People who are too much don't have the kind of presence that makes someone knock on their door in the middle of the night, because somewhere in their drunk, broken brain, they understand she will open it. He paused. That's not too much, Olivia. That's exactly enough. The snow fell. She looked at the yard. She did not look at him, because if she looked at him right now, she was going to cry, and she'd spent a long time training herself out of doing that in front of other people. You should get some sleep, she said. You look tired. A pause. She could feel him looking at her profile. "Yeah," he said. "You're right." He stood up, picked up his empty coffee mug. "Thank you. Again." "Stop thanking me." "Why?" "Because you're going to run out of things to be thanked for, and then it'll be weird." She heard the sound that came from him, low and unexpected. A real laugh. Quiet and real and surprised out of him, like something that hadn't quite remembered how to happen. "Good night, Olivia," he said. "Good night, Ethan." She listened to his footsteps down the hallway, the soft click of the guest room door. Outside, the snow kept falling. Patient and indifferent and beautiful in the way that cold things sometimes are. Olivia pressed her hand against the cold window glass for a moment. What is happening, she thought. What is this? She didn't have an answer, but she stayed in the sunroom for a long time after that, with the snow falling and the house full of people for the first time in longer than she could rightly say. And she thought, this is what a light in the window is for. This is exactly what it's for. 3 days. That was what Ethan had told himself. 3 days to get his head straight, sort through the mess at the house, figure out his next move. 3 days, and then he and Sophie would go back to their life, and Olivia Bennett would go back to hers. And this whole thing would become a strange story, he told himself, at 3 a.m, when he couldn't sleep. 3 days became 5. 5 became 8. And on the 8th morning, Olivia came downstairs to find Ethan already in her kitchen, making coffee, moving around her space like he'd been doing it for years. And she stood in the doorway for a moment before he heard her and turned around, and neither of them said anything about it. "Coffee's ready," he said. "I can see that," she said. She pulled out her chair and sat down. He poured her a cup without asking how she took it, because by this point he knew 2 sugars, just enough cream to turn it the color of caramel, and she liked the mug with the chip in the handle because it had been her grandmother's. He set it in front of her and sat down across from her, and they drank their coffee in the early morning quiet, while Sophie's small voice drifted down from upstairs, talking to Butterscotch, with the complete seriousness of a child who has decided a cat is a reasonable conversational partner. This was the problem with Ethan Walker. He had moved into her house like water moves into low ground, quietly, gradually, and by the time you noticed, it had already become part of the landscape. Olivia told herself it was temporary. She told herself this every morning and every evening and several times in between, especially during the moments that felt too comfortable, too natural, too much, like something she wasn't allowed to have. She told herself Ethan was a man in crisis, and she was a woman with a spare room and a functional stove, and what was happening here was not what it felt like. But on day 8, something shifted. And it started with a phone call Ethan didn't know she overheard. She was coming back from the bakery just after noon, the kind of cold that makes your face ache, when she pushed through the front door and she heard his voice from the kitchen, low and tight and stripped down to something raw. "I know what I owe you, Daniel. I'm not disputing the number." A pause. "What I'm telling you is that I don't have it. Not right now." Another pause longer. "Don't threaten me. Don't ever threaten me again." And then the sharp sound of a call ending a phone hitting a counter. Olivia stood in the front hall for a moment. Then she took off her coat and went into the kitchen. Ethan was standing at the counter with his back to her, both hands pressed flat on the surface, his head down, like a man who was physically holding himself in place. "Rough call," she said. He straightened up, turned around. His face was shut down in a way she hadn't seen since the first night. The walls back up the careful, blank expression of a man who had decided something was nobody else's business. "Just some financial stuff," he said. "Okay," she said. She didn't push. She went to the refrigerator and started taking out what she needed for lunch, and she felt him watching her, waiting for her to ask more, and when she didn't, something in his posture shifted. "His name is Daniel Marsh," Ethan said. She paused, didn't turn around. "Okay. He was my business partner, before." He stopped. "After Rebecca died, I tried to keep the contracting company running. Daniel was handling the financial side. I wasn't paying attention the way I should have been. I was handling the grief and Sophie and just trying to get through each day." He exhaled through his nose. By the time I looked at the books, there was $160,000 missing. Now she turned around. Ethan wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the counter at his hands at something just past all of it. I couldn't prove it. Not in a way that would hold up. He had the books structured in a way that made it look like bad business decisions, market shifts, bad luck. His jaw worked. The company went under. I lost the house we had in Denver, had to sell it at a loss to cover the debts. Moved here with Sophie, and $4,300 in the bank, and whatever work I could pick up doing freelance contracting. Olivia set down what she was holding. He's been quiet for 2 years, Ethan said. Now he's calling again. What does he want? He says I owe him money. A short, humorless sound. He restructured the debt from the company collapse in his name somehow. I don't fully understand the legal mechanics of it, but he's saying I owe him $40,000, and if I don't pay, he's going to sue. The kitchen was very quiet. Does he know where you are? She asked. Here in Cedar Falls. Ethan looked up at her then, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Not just anger, not just exhaustion. Fear. The particular kind that has a child's face in it. He knows, Ethan said. He always knew. That's what the call was about. He was reminding me that he knows. Olivia pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. She laced her hands together on the table and looked at him directly. Tell me everything, she said. From the beginning. Don't leave out the parts you're embarrassed about. I need all of it. He looked at her for a long moment. Why? Because I know a lawyer, she said. And because you just told me enough that I can tell you haven't told anyone else any of this. And because you're sitting in my kitchen, Ethan, and I'm not in the habit of letting someone drown in my kitchen. Something crossed his face. Something old and complicated, and she saw it flash and then disappear back behind the wall. You shouldn't have to deal with my... Tell me, she said, quietly, firm. And he did. It took an hour. Sophie came downstairs halfway through, and Olivia gave her a plate of apple slices and peanut butter and turned on the small television in the living room without breaking stride, and Sophie went without argument, sensing in the uncanny way of children that the adults needed the room. Ethan talked, and Olivia listened, and asked questions, and listened some more, and by the end, she had a picture of the last 3 years of his life that was more complete than anything she'd assembled in the 8 days he'd been living in her house. Daniel Marsh had not just stolen money. He had dismantled the company from the inside, deliberately, systematically, and then structured the aftermath so that Ethan was holding all the liability. He'd done it while Ethan was in the worst year of his life. He had watched a grieving man who trusted him, and he had reached into that trust and taken everything he could carry. He's coming back now, Ethan said, because he heard I've been doing some contracting work. Steady income. He wants a cut. He wants you scared, Olivia said. He's got that. No. She shook her head. He wants you scared enough to pay him quietly and go away. That's different from actually having legal standing. She paused. Did you ever document anything, emails, texts, bank records? Anything from the original partnership? Ethan went still. I have boxes, he said slowly. From the company. I never went through them. After the collapse, I just packed everything and put it in storage in Denver, and I haven't looked at any of it. Can you get the boxes? Yeah. Yeah, I could drive out there. It's 4 hours. Can you get them this week? He stared at her. Olivia, I'm not a lawyer, she said, but I know what records look like, and I know what questions to ask, and my friend Laura Chen has been practicing business law in Boulder for 11 years, and she owes me 4 birthday cakes. She stood up. Daniel Marsh made a mistake. He came back. Ethan was looking at her like she'd just said something in a language he didn't know he spoke. Why are you doing this? He said. Any of this. Why do you keep... He stopped himself, looked at the table. People don't just do things like this, not without wanting something back. What do you think I want? She said, not challenging, genuinely asking. I don't know, he said. That's what I can't figure out. Maybe I just don't like watching someone get cheated. She picked up her coffee mug. Or maybe I'm a woman who's spent 34 years being told she doesn't have anything worth offering, and I've decided to stop believing that. She looked at him steadily. Either way, I'm going to make lunch. And then you're going to call the storage facility in Denver and find out when you can get those boxes. She turned to the stove. Behind her, after a moment, she heard him say it, very quietly. Thank you, Olivia. I told you to stop thanking me. I know. A pause. I'm going to keep doing it anyway. She didn't respond, but she turned up the burner and she let herself smile at the wall where no one could see it. That afternoon, while Sophie was at school, Olivia had been driving her every morning, a fact that had stopped being strange by day. Ethan went upstairs to make calls, and Olivia sat at her kitchen table with her laptop and started doing what she had always been quietly, privately good at finding things. She pulled up county records, business registration databases, the filing records from Ethan's contracting company, which were publicly accessible because the company had gone through a formal dissolution process. She cross-referenced Daniel Marsh's name against the filings and found what she was looking for within 40 minutes. Daniel Marsh had refiled two of the company's outstanding liabilities under a personal LLC he had created 2 months before the company collapsed, which meant he had known the company was going to collapse before Ethan had, which meant this wasn't a business failure. This was a setup. She printed the documents. She made a second cup of coffee, and she sat with what she'd found for a long moment, feeling the particular cold satisfaction of a truth that had been hiding in plain sight finally brought into light. Then she heard Ethan's footsteps on the stairs and she called out, "You need to come look at something." He came into the kitchen and she turned the printed pages toward him without preamble. He looked at them. And she watched his face go through something: disbelief first, then recognition, then a fury so deep and controlled, it was almost frightening in how quiet it was. "He knew," Ethan said. He said it slowly, like a man confirming the time of death. "He knew it was going down, and he set it up so I'd be holding the bag." 2 months before, Olivia said. "The LLC filing date is right there." Ethan sat down heavily in the chair across from her. He pressed his hand over his mouth and stared at the pages. While Rebecca this was the same month she died. His voice had gone flat. "I was planning her funeral, and he was restructuring the liability, so it would fall on me." The kitchen was very still. Olivia reached across the table and put her hand over his. She didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that would be adequate, and she'd learned a long time ago that the most honest thing you could sometimes offer was just your hand. He looked at it. Then he looked at her. "I'm going to Denver tomorrow," he said. "I'll call Laura tonight," she said. He turned his hand over under hers so that their palms were touching, and he held on for just a moment. Not romantic, not complicated, just the grip of a person who has just seen the shape of a thing that has been hunting him for 3 years and needed something solid to hold on to. Then he let go and picked up the pages and read through them again, and Olivia got up to start dinner. That night was different. Sophie felt it. Children always feel the shifts in adult atmosphere. The change in barometric pressure that has nothing to do with weather. She was quieter at dinner, watching her father with careful eyes, the way she watched him when she wasn't sure which version of him had come home. But this version of Ethan surprised her. He talked at dinner. Really talked, not the short, careful sentences he usually rationed, but real conversation, asking Sophie about her day in a way that invited more than yes and no. Sophie told him about a disagreement she'd had with her friend Maya over whose turn it was on the monkey bars, and Ethan listened like it was the most important legal dispute he'd heard all day, which Olivia thought maybe it was. "So, what did you do?" Ethan asked. "I said Maya could go first," Sophie said. "But only because I'm faster and I would catch up anyway." "That's very strategic," Ethan said. "I know," Sophie said. "I was also being kind." "You can be both," Olivia said. Sophie nodded firmly. "That's what I said." She pointed her fork at Ethan. "Olivia gets it, Dad." Something shifted in Ethan's expression at that, a warmth that moved through his eyes so fast she almost missed it. Almost. After dinner, Sophie asked if she could help with the dishes, and in the casual, decisive way of children, she positioned herself between Ethan and Olivia at the sink, and handed dishes to each of them alternately, as if she were organizing the world the way she wanted it. Later, after Sophie was in bed, Ethan knocked on the sunroom door, where Olivia was sitting with a book she hadn't been reading. "She likes you," he said. He leaned in the doorway. "Sophie, she's been careful with people since Rebecca. She doesn't warm up easily." "She warmed up to butterscotch," Olivia said. "Butterscotch is extraordinary," Ethan said. "He knows it." She closed her book. "Sophie's extraordinary too." "She is." He was quiet for a moment. "She told me tonight when I put her to bed that she likes it here." The words landed somewhere soft and unprotected inside Olivia's chest. "Kids need stability," she said carefully. "Yeah." He wasn't moving from the doorway. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You're living in my house," she said. "I think that cleared the personal threshold a while back." The ghost of a smile. "Fair." He crossed his arms the way he did when he was about to say something that cost him. Is there someone who? "Are you asking if there's a man?" she said, levelly. "I'm asking badly," he admitted. "There was someone," she said. 2 years ago, Marcus. He was a teacher at the elementary school. We dated for 7 months. She kept her voice easy, matter of fact. "He left." She paused. "He didn't say exactly why, but I knew. I was too much for him to manage. Too emotional, too present. He wanted something lower volume." Ethan was quiet. "Before that, there were 2 others," she continued, because apparently she was doing this now. "Both of them left for women who looked like what men in this town think women are supposed to look like." She met his eyes. "I've made peace with it. Mostly." "Mostly," he repeated. "You want me to say I've made total peace with it," she said, "that I never lie awake wondering what's wrong with me. That's not honest. So I'll tell you mostly, and that'll have to be good enough." He looked at her for a long time, in a way that made her want to look away, and also strangely made her want to stay completely still and let him. "Marcus was an idiot," Ethan said. She blinked. "Just objectively speaking," he said. "An idiot." He pushed off the doorframe. "Good night, Olivia." "Good night," she said. She listened to him go down the hall. She picked up her book. She put it down again. She sat in the dark sunroom and thought about the word idiot in Ethan Walker's voice, and decided she was going to need to be very careful about herself. The next morning he drove to Denver. He was back by 8 o'clock that evening with 4 boxes in the back of his truck, and he brought them straight into Olivia's kitchen and stacked them on the table. Sophie was already asleep. The house was quiet. They went through the boxes together. It took 4 hours. Olivia had a system she went through, everything methodically pulling documents that seemed relevant, setting them aside, building a timeline. Ethan sat across from her and went through the financial records, his face getting tighter as the picture became clearer. By midnight, they had enough. Not just the LLC filing. There were emails, printed copies Ethan had made without knowing why, some instinct for self-preservation he hadn't even known he was operating on at the time. Emails between Daniel and someone named Garrett Bloom, in which Daniel laid out in careful corporate language that translated plainly. Once you knew what you were looking at, the exact plan to restructure the company debt. "This is it," Olivia said quietly. She held up the email chain. "This is what Laura needs." Ethan took the papers from her, read them again. "He put it in writing," he said. "Disbelief and fury in equal measure." He actually put it in writing. "Arrogance," Olivia said. "He thought you'd never look. He thought you were too deep in grief and too beaten down to ever dig it out." "He was almost right," Ethan said. "He was wrong," she said simply. He set the papers down on the table. He looked across at her and the look on his face was one she'd seen pieces of before, but never assembled like this: gratitude and something raw underneath it, something that was reaching for a word it didn't quite have yet. "You did this," he said. "You found the LLC filing. Without that, I wouldn't even have known where to look." "You had the boxes," she said. "You kept the boxes." "I didn't even know why I kept them." "Yes, you did," she said. "You kept them because part of you always knew the story wasn't over." He stood up from the table slowly. He walked around to her side and stopped in front of her, and she looked up at him, and the kitchen was very quiet, except for the sound of the furnace and the distant sound of wind against the windows. "I don't know how to do this," he said. His voice was low and a little rough. "I don't know how to—" He stopped. Tried again. "I've been alone for 3 years, Olivia. I forgot what it felt like to have someone, to have a person who—" "You don't have to say it," she said. "I want to say it." "Ethan." She said his name the way you say something you're being careful with. "I wake up in the morning and the first thing I want to do is come downstairs and see if you're already in the kitchen," he said. It came out quiet and direct and unguarded in a way she didn't think he was used to. "That's new. That's been gone for a long time. And I'm not going to pretend I know what it means, but I know I don't want to pretend it's not happening." Olivia looked at him. She thought about Marcus and the two before Marcus. She thought about every morning she'd woken up in this house alone and told herself that was fine, that was her life, that was what she got. She thought about 34 years of making herself smaller and quieter and less, always less. "I'm scared of this," she said honestly. "So am I," he said. "That's how I know it's real." She breathed. "We still have a problem," she said. "Daniel Marsh." "Yeah." He didn't look away. "Yeah, we do." "He's not going to like being cornered." "No, he's not." "So we need to be smart about this. Laura needs to see everything before we make any move. He can't know we have the emails." "Agreed. And until this is resolved—" She stopped. "Until this is resolved," he said quietly, "I'm not going anywhere." She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her chest was doing something she hadn't given it permission to do. "Your daughter told me this morning," she said carefully, "that Butterscotch is her cat now, and she's taking him when you leave." Ethan's mouth curved. "She said the same thing to me, in almost exactly those words. You're going to have to negotiate with a 7-year-old for custody of my cat." "I've handled harder negotiations." "I find that very hard to believe," Olivia said. And this time, Ethan Walker laughed. A real laugh, full and unguarded, and almost surprised by itself, the laugh of a man rediscovering a sound he'd thought he'd lost for good. It filled the kitchen. It filled the whole first floor of her small house. It went up the stairs and under the door of the guest room, and Olivia was almost certain in some part of her that had gone very still, and very certain that it reached all the way to where Sophie was sleeping and settled around the little girl like something warm. She called Laura Chen the next day. Laura answered on the second ring, the way she always did. Voice sharp and ready, already in work mode at 7 in the morning, because Laura Chen had been in work mode since approximately the 4th grade. "Olivia, how many cakes do I owe you?" "4, Olivia said. "And I need the biggest one." A pause. "Tell me," Olivia told her. "All of it, the LLC, filing the email chain, the debt, restructuring the phone calls, the number Daniel was claiming." She talked for 15 minutes, and Laura listened without interrupting, which was how Olivia knew she was taking it seriously, because Laura interrupted everyone. When she finished, Laura said, "Don't contact Marsh. Don't let Walker contact Marsh. Tell Walker not to pay anything, not a single dollar, not in response to anything Marsh puts in writing." "Can he do that?" "Yes," Olivia said. "Then tell Walker I need the original documents. I want to look at the email chain myself." A pause. "Olivia, this is bad for Marsh. If these emails say what you're telling me, they say he didn't just steal from a grieving man. He committed fraud, structured fraud. That's not a civil matter." Olivia's hand tightened on her phone. I know. I want to meet with Walker this week. I'll set it up. She hung up and went into the kitchen where Ethan was sitting with Sophie, helping her with a worksheet from school. Sophie was explaining at some length why the method the worksheet wanted her to use to solve a subtraction problem was inferior to the method she preferred, and Ethan was listening with the focused attention of a man who had decided his daughter's opinions deserved to be taken seriously. Laura wants to meet with you this week, Olivia said. She set her phone on the counter. She says, don't pay Marsh anything and don't contact him. Ethan looked up. Sophie looked up. Two pairs of identical dark eyes. She thinks you have a case, Ethan said. She thinks Marsh might have a criminal problem, Olivia said carefully with one eye on Sophie. Ethan went very still. Sophie looked between them with the evaluating gaze of a child who has learned to read adult atmospheres the way some children learn to read weather. Is the bad man in trouble? She asked. Ethan and Olivia looked at each other. What bad man? Ethan said carefully. Sophie gave him the look of a child dealing patiently with an adult who is being deliberately slow. Dad, I'm 7, not 4. I heard you and Olivia last night. She picked up her pencil. I heard his name, Daniel. She said it the way children say names they've decided are ugly, flatly without inflection. He took our money. The kitchen was completely quiet. Yeah, baby? Ethan said. His voice had gone rough. He did. Sophie nodded. She looked at her worksheet. She looked at Olivia. Then she said with the complete calm of someone who had already decided, Olivia's going to fix it. Olivia opened her mouth. She fixes things, Sophie said simply, and went back to her worksheet. That's what she does. Ethan looked at Olivia across the kitchen. And what was in his eyes? She had a word for it now, finally. It was the look of a man watching someone become necessary to him in real time, in a way he hadn't planned for and couldn't stop, and had maybe decided he didn't want to. Olivia looked back at him. The morning light was coming through the kitchen window. Butterscotch was on the counter. Sophie was doing math. The coffee was getting cold. And in the quiet of her small kitchen in Cedar Falls, Colorado, Olivia Bennett understood something that hit her, like stepping into cold air, sudden and total, and impossible to ignore. She was already in this. She had been in this since the moment she opened her front door and saw a broken man with a crying child and decided that a light in the window meant something. She was in this. And she was not afraid. She was not afraid. That was the thing she had not expected. Laura Chen arrived on a Wednesday. She drove up from Boulder in a silver car that looked like it cost more than most people in Cedar Falls made in a year, and she walked into Olivia's kitchen in a charcoal blazer and heels that clicked on the hardwood, like she was announcing herself to a courtroom. She was small and precise, and had the kind of energy that made a room pay attention without her having to ask for it. She shook Ethan's hand, looked at him for exactly 3 seconds. The way lawyers look at potential clients, measuring, assessing, deciding. And then she sat down, opened her bag and said, "Show me everything." Ethan looked at Olivia. Olivia nodded once. Ethan laid the documents on the table. Laura went through them without speaking. She read the email chain twice. She studied the LLC filing with the focused stillness of someone who had spent years learning exactly what to look for in exactly this kind of paper. The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of pages turning, and distantly, Sophie upstairs talking to Butterscotch about something that seemed to require a great deal of emphasis. When Laura finished, she set the papers down and looked at Ethan directly. "You know what this is," she said. "Tell me anyway," Ethan said. "This is premeditated fraud." She tapped the LLC filing. "He created this entity 63 days before your company officially collapsed. That is not a coincidence, and no reasonable jury is going to see it as one." She tapped the email chain. "And this is him putting the plan in writing to a co-conspirator, which means we have 2 potential defendants, not 1. She leaned back in her chair. "What Daniel Marsh did to you is not a civil tort. It's a crime. The question is, what you want to do with that." Ethan was quiet for a moment. His hands were flat on the table, the way they got when he was containing something. What are my options? Option 1. Laura said, I file a civil suit for recovery of the fraudulently transferred assets plus damages. We use the documents to establish the timeline and intent. You'd likely recover significantly, though litigation takes time, and Marsh will fight it, and it will be ugly. She paused. Option 2. And this is the more serious road I take what you have to the DA's office. Let them look at it for criminal fraud charges. If they take it up, Marsh is looking at felony exposure. That changes everything about his bargaining position. Ethan looked at Olivia. She met his eyes and said nothing, because this was his decision, and she was not going to make it for him. What would Rebecca have said? He asked. Not to Laura, to Olivia. It caught her off guard. She thought about it honestly. She would have said, make sure Sophie never has to hear his name again, Olivia said. Ethan turned back to Laura. Option 2, he said. Take it to the DA. Laura nodded like she had expected that answer. Good. I'll need a few days to prepare the presentation. She started gathering the documents. In the meantime, and I cannot stress this enough, no contact with Marsh. Not by phone, not by text, not through anyone else. If he reaches out, you forward it to me immediately, and you do not respond. She looked at Ethan hard. Not even if he threatens you, especially if he threatens you. Understood, Ethan said. Laura looked at Olivia. A different look, softer, quicker. The look of a woman reading another woman's situation with the speed of long practice. You found the LLC filing, she said. County Records Database, Olivia said. Laura's mouth curved just slightly. You're wasted on a bakery. I love my bakery, Olivia said. I know you do. Laura smoothed her blazer. I'll call you by Friday. She picked up her bag, looked at Ethan one more time. You should have done this 2 years ago. I know, Ethan said. You were dealing with other things, Laura said, and her voice had dropped the lawyer edge for just a moment. I'm sorry about your wife. She left. Her car pulled out of the driveway, and the sound of the engine faded down the street, and the kitchen settled back into its particular quiet. Ethan sat without moving for a long moment. Then he put his elbows on the table and his face in his hands and just breathed, in and out. The breathing of a man who has been holding something for 3 years and just felt the first real possibility of putting it down. Olivia got up and poured them both fresh coffee. She set his in front of him and sat back down. She didn't say anything. He didn't need words right now. He needed the particular human company of someone who could sit beside a hard moment without trying to fix it with noise. After a while, he lifted his face from his hands. Okay, he said. Okay, she agreed. He reached across the table and picked up his coffee. Tell me something good, he said. Tell me something about the bakery. What are you making today? She looked at him. And she did. She told him about the order that had come in yesterday for a retirement party. A woman named Shirley Dobbs, who was retiring after 31 years, teaching 2nd grade, and wanted a cake shaped like an open book with all her students' names written on the pages in edible gold ink. Olivia had been sketching the design since 6 that morning. She told him about the way the gold ink had to be applied with a brush no wider than a pencil, and how she liked the slow patience of it, the way it forced you to be present in each letter. Ethan listened like there was nowhere else he needed to be. That was the thing about him that she kept not being prepared for. He listened like it mattered. Not politely, not with the half attention of someone waiting for a pause in the conversation so they could say their own thing. He listened like your words were worth arriving for. She was starting to understand why that was dangerous. 4 days later, on a Sunday evening, Daniel Marsh called Ethan's cell phone at 7:42. Olivia knew the exact time because she was standing 3 feet away when it happened. She saw Ethan's face change when he looked at the screen, a quick, hard tightening around the eyes, and she saw him remember Laura's instruction because she watched him choose physically not to answer it. He let it go to voicemail. They stood in the kitchen looking at each other. The voicemail notification appeared 30 seconds later. Ethan pressed play and held the phone out between them so she could hear. The voice was smooth. That was the first thing. The kind of smooth that came from practice, from someone who had spent years learning how to make threats sound like friendly conversation. Ethan. Hey, it's Daniel. Listen, I've been trying to give you space really because I understand things have been hard. But I need you to understand that I'm running out of patience here. The number I've given you is more than fair given the circumstances, and I need to see some movement this week. I want to be reasonable about this. I really do. But if I don't hear from you by Thursday, I'm going to have to start making some calls. And I would hate for Sophie to find out what kind of businessman her father really was. A pause. Call me back. Sophie's name. In his mouth, like a card he knew how to play. The kitchen was so quiet Olivia could hear the refrigerator hum. Ethan's hand closed around the phone and his knuckles went white, and she put her hand on his arm. Not his hand. His arm firm enough that he could feel the pressure through his shirt, and she said, "Don't." He looked at her. His eyes were black with a fury she had never quite seen in them before, focused and cold and completely controlled, which was somehow more frightening than rage would have been. "He used her name," Ethan said. "I know. He mentioned Sophie." "I heard." She kept her hand on his arm. "Send the voicemail to Laura, right now. Send it and put the phone down." He held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then he forwarded the voicemail to Laura, set the phone face down on the counter, and put both hands flat on the surface and breathed. "He knows something's changed," Olivia said. "He's escalating because he can tell you're not scared the same way you were." "How would he know that?" "Because you didn't pick up," she said. "The old version of you would have picked up. He's used to you picking up and apologizing and asking for more time. You didn't pick up and it scared him." She watched his face. "That's good. Scared people make mistakes." Ethan looked at her. Something shifted in him. She saw it, the anger not disappearing, but reshaping into something harder and colder and more useful. "You think like a strategist," he said. "I think like someone who's been underestimated her whole life," she said. "You learn to see the angles." His phone buzzed. A text from Laura. "Got it. Perfect. Do not respond. I'm calling the DA's office first thing tomorrow. This voicemail just accelerated our timeline significantly." He threatened a minor. "Stay calm and stay quiet." Ethan read it twice, then he set the phone down. "She says it's good," Olivia said. "I heard." He was quiet. Then, if he actually tries to come here, he won't get past the front door. Ethan looked at her. A complicated look. "Olivia, if Marsh figures out that you're involved in this, that you found the documents, that you connected me to Laura, he might try to use that. Against you. Against the bakery." She had already thought about this. She had thought about it the night she found the LLC filing and sat in her kitchen for 15 minutes before deciding to print it. She had chosen it with full knowledge of what it might cost. "Then he figures it out," she said. "That's not Ethan." She said his name with the same firmness she'd been using since the beginning. The one that wasn't hard but wasn't movable either. "I'm already in this. The only direction is forward." He stared at her. That look again, the one that had been building since day one, accumulating meaning every time it appeared heavier each time. "Why?" he said. "I keep asking you why, and you keep giving me smart answers. But I want the real one." She was quiet for a moment. "Because Sophie told me I fix things," she said finally. "And I'm not going to be the person who makes her wrong about that." Ethan didn't say anything. He looked at her for a long time. And then he did something she hadn't anticipated. He reached up and put his hand against the side of her face, his palm warm against her cheek, his thumb at the edge of her jaw, the touch of someone being very deliberate and very careful. Like he was handling something he understood was precious and did not want to break. "Olivia," he said. "Don't," she said. "Not cold, not a rejection, just careful. Not right now. Not while all of this is still." "Okay," he said. He didn't move his hand immediately. He held it there for one more second, like a word he was finishing. Then he let go and stepped back, and the air in the kitchen felt different in the space where his hand had been. "But I'm going to say it eventually," he said. "I know," she said. "And you're not going to run." She looked at him steadily. "I don't run," Laura called Monday morning at 9:15. Her voice was so controlled it was almost eerie. "I met with Deputy DA Hartman this morning. He's seen the documents. He's seen the voicemail." A pause. "He's opening a criminal investigation into Daniel Marsh for wire fraud and intentional financial fraud. They're going to move within the week." Olivia was standing in the back of the bakery when the call came through, flour on her apron, the scent of cinnamon and brown sugar heavy in the air around her. She had to set down the bowl she was holding. "Within the week," she repeated. "They want Marsh to think everything is normal for as long as possible." The voicemail mentioning Sophie that changed things. "The DA doesn't like when people use children as leverage." Laura paused. "He's going to be served. It will not be quiet. You need to prepare Walker for the fact that this is going to become public knowledge in Cedar Falls." "He can handle public," Olivia said. "Can you?" Laura said, not unkindly. Olivia thought about it. "Ask me again when it's over," she said. She told Ethan that night after Sophie was asleep. She told him sitting across from him at the kitchen table the way she had for everything else, steady and direct, no softening, no sugarcoating. She told him the DA was moving. She told him it would become public. She watched his face go through a sequence of things, relief, then gravity, then something that looked almost like disbelief at himself. "It's really happening," he said. "It's really happening. 3 years," he said. Not to her, really. To himself. To the 3 years. 3 years I accepted it. Like it was what I deserved. Like the collapse was on me, and I had to just carry that and move on. "You were in grief," she said. He picked his timing deliberately. "I know that now." His voice was flat and tired. "Doesn't make me feel better about what I let myself believe. Ethan, he was counting on you blaming yourself. That was the plan. You were supposed to be so deep in your own guilt that you never thought to look at him." She leaned forward slightly. "You're not the man who let himself get defrauded. You're the man who kept the boxes. You're the man who, when he finally had someone in his corner, went and got the boxes and didn't flinch from what was in them." She paused. "Those are not the same man." He looked at her across the table. The kitchen light was overhead, warm and ordinary, and his face in that light was open in a way she had seen it become gradually. Over the past weeks, the wall's not gone, but the gates unlocked the kind of access that only gets offered to people who have earned it. "You know what Sophie said to me tonight?" he said. "What?" "She said she wants to stay here. Not just for a while. She said—" He stopped. His jaw worked. "She said she wants this to be where we live. She said she wants to wake up every morning and know Olivia's downstairs and butterscotch is on the counter." The kitchen was very quiet. "She's 7, Olivia said carefully. "She's never asked for anything like that," Ethan said. "Not in 3 years. She's never asked for a place. She's just accepted wherever we were, whatever the situation. She stopped asking for things after Rebecca." His voice had gone rough at the edges. "And last night she asked for something. She knew what she wanted and she said it." Olivia looked at the table, at her own hands. "Ethan, I'm not asking you for anything right now," he said. "I know the timing is wrong. I know everything with Marsh is still live. I know you have your own life, your bakery, your things." He pressed his hands flat on the table. "I just wanted you to know what she said, because you should know that you've done something for that kid that I couldn't do by myself. You gave her back her voice. She asked for what she wanted. Do you understand how long I've been waiting for her to do that?" Olivia pressed her lips together hard. She was not going to cry. She had a firm policy about crying in front of people, and she was not going to break it now. "She's a good kid," she managed. "She's incredible," Ethan said. "And she picked you." 3 days later at 6 in the morning, Olivia's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer it. She was standing at her kitchen counter making coffee, still in her robe, still in that half-awake state between sleep and the day, and she almost let it go. She answered it. "Is this Olivia Bennett?" The voice was male, middle-aged, with a flatness to it that told her this was not a social call. "Yes," she said. "My name is Kevin Greer. I work with Daniel Marsh." A pause. "I think we should talk." Olivia set down her coffee mug very slowly. "About what?" "About what you've been doing with Ethan Walker's paperwork." Another pause. "And about what it might cost you." She did not let a single thing she was feeling into her voice. She had been underestimated her entire life by people who mistook her warmth for softness, and she had learned long ago that the most powerful thing she could do in a moment like this was sound like she was not afraid. "I think," she said, "that you should know I'm recording this call." She was not recording the call. A silence. Then, "Ms. Bennett, I also think," she continued, "that you calling me directly this early in the morning without a lawyer is probably the dumbest thing Daniel Marsh has asked you to do. And from what I understand, he's asked you to do some pretty dumb things." She paused. "But here's what I'm going to do for you, Kevin. I'm going to end this call, and I'm going to send the number you're calling from to the DA's office investigator, and then I'm going to make myself a cup of coffee, and you're going to go back and tell Daniel that it didn't work." She let one beat of silence sit there. "Have a good morning." She hung up. She stood in her kitchen with her heart slamming against her ribs. Then she picked her phone back up and texted Laura. "Someone named Kevin Greer just called me from this number. I think Marsh sent him to warn me off. I told him I was recording and hung up." Laura's response came back in under a minute. "Perfect. That call just became evidence of witness intimidation. Do not be alone for the next few days. Tell Walker." She was still looking at the text when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair still rough from sleep, reading her face with the speed he'd developed over the past weeks. "What happened?" She showed him the texts. She watched him read them. When he looked up, the controlled fury was back in his eyes, that cold, focused fire. "He called you," Ethan said. "Someone who works for him. He called you." He said it again, slower, like he was taking the full weight of it somewhere inside him. "He's trying to use you to get to me. He's scared," she said. "He's starting to feel the walls closing." "Olivia." He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and stopped in front of her close enough that she had to look up to see his face. "I'm not going to let him touch you. I need you to understand that." "I know," she said. "I mean it. I know you mean it." She held his gaze. "And I need you to understand that I'm not going to fall apart over a phone call. He tried to scare me. It didn't work." She paused. "That's over. What we need to do right now is call Laura and then get Sophie up for school and make breakfast, because the world keeps moving and so do we." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Something in his expression had gone so unguarded, it was almost hard to meet. "I have never," he said slowly, "met a person like you." She wanted to deflect it. She almost deflected it. The old habit was right there, the move to turn it aside with a joke or a shrug or something light and uninvested. She didn't. "I know," she said instead. And she let it be true. He reached out and took her hand. Not the way he'd touched her face. This was different, less tentative. He just took her hand and held it standing in the kitchen in the early morning, while the coffee maker finished its cycle, while upstairs Sophie was waking up and Butterscotch was probably knocking something off the dresser, while 4 hours away, a man named Daniel Marsh was making his last desperate calculations. Ethan held her hand, and she let him. Laura called at noon with news that moved through Olivia like a current. The DA had moved up the timeline. They had obtained a warrant to examine Daniel Marsh's financial records, triggered in part by the Greer call and what Laura had described to them as a pattern of witness intimidation. Marsh had been notified that he was under criminal investigation. "He knows," Laura said. "He'll know you're involved. He'll know Walker isn't alone in this. "What does that mean for the next few days?" Olivia asked. "It means he might try something stupid," Laura said flatly. "Or he might lawyer up and go quiet. Those are the two directions panicking men go. I don't know which kind Marsh is." Olivia thought about the voicemail, about Sophie's name in his smooth, practiced voice. "He's the kind who tries something stupid," she said. "Then be ready for it," Laura said. "And Olivia, what you did with those county records, the way you built the timeline, that is going to matter in court. You found the thread. Everything we have pulled from that thread." After she hung up, Olivia stood in the back of her bakery for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the ovens, the familiar smell of sugar and warmth, and her grandmother's language. She thought about what Laura had said. She thought about being ready. She had spent her whole life being ready in the wrong ways, ready to apologize, ready to make herself smaller, ready to accept less. She had been ready in all the ways that protected other people and cost her. This was different. This readiness had a direction. She untied her apron, hung it on the hook, and picked up her phone to call Ethan. He answered on the first ring. "They've notified Marsh," she said. A breath on his end, controlled. "Okay. Laura thinks he might do something before it gets too far along. Something reactive." "I know." A pause. "I'm picking up Sophie early. I want her out of her regular routine for the next few days." "Bring her here," Olivia said. It came out without deliberation. Completely natural. "Come straight here." A silence. Not an uncertain one. The kind that happens when something that was already true gets said out loud for the first time. "We'll be there in 20 minutes, Ethan said. She was still holding the phone when Carla came in from the front with the afternoon delivery clipboard and looked at her face and said, "What's happening? You've got that look." "What look?" Olivia said. "The one where something big is about to happen, and you've already decided you're going to be standing up when it does," Carla said. Olivia thought about that. She thought about the woman who used to sit at her kitchen table alone at 2 in the morning going over receipts and telling herself this was enough. This was her life. This was the shape of things. "Yeah," she said. "Something big is about to happen." She was not wrong, because at 4:17 that afternoon, while Sophie was at Olivia's kitchen table doing homework, and Butterscotch was presiding over the proceedings from the counter, and Ethan was on the phone with Laura in the living room, a black SUV parked on the street in front of the house. It sat there for 11 minutes. Sophie was the one who noticed it. "Dad," she said. Not loud. The quiet voice she used when she was certain about something. "There's a car outside that's been there a long time." Ethan came to the window. He looked for 3 seconds. He turned to Olivia, and his face was completely calm in the way that only very controlled people can be calm when something has finally arrived that they've been bracing for. "Call Laura," he said. "Then call the non-emergency police line and give them the plate number." "Already writing it down," Olivia said. Sophie watched both of them. She looked at the window. She looked back at Olivia. "Is that him?" she asked. Ethan crouched down to his daughter's level. He put both hands on her shoulders gently. "I don't know yet, baby. But whatever it is, it's okay. We're okay. Olivia and I have been getting ready for this." Sophie looked past him at Olivia. Her eyes were serious and unafraid, in the particular way of a child who has decided to trust the adults she has chosen. "Okay," she said. She looked at her homework. She picked up her pencil. "Tell me when it's over." And she went back to her math. Ethan stood up. He looked across the room at Olivia. The late afternoon light came through the windows, and the house was warm, and somewhere outside, a car sat at the curb with a man in it who had spent 3 years betting that Ethan Walker was alone. He had been wrong about that for 17 days now. Olivia pressed the non-emergency line and started talking, and Ethan stood by the window, and Sophie worked her equations, and the bakery owner from Cedar Falls, who had never believed she was someone people fought for, finally understood with a certainty that went all the way down to the bone that she had been wrong about that her whole life. She was exactly someone worth fighting for. And the man standing at her window had already decided he was going to prove it. The black SUV sat at the curb for 11 minutes and then drove away. No one got out. No one knocked. It simply left the way it had arrived, quietly, deliberately, like a message written in a language designed to make you doubt whether you'd read it correctly. Officer Dale Briggs, from the Cedar Falls PD, showed up 14 minutes after Olivia's call, took down the plate number, walked the perimeter of the property with his hands on his belt, and told them the vehicle was registered to a rental company out of Denver. He wrote it in his notepad, gave Ethan his card, and said to call if anything else happened. His tone was professional and unhurried, the tone of a man who dealt with things that felt enormous to the people experiencing them and routine to everyone else. When he left, Sophie looked up from her homework. "Did the police fix it?" "They're working on it," Ethan said. Sophie considered this. "That's what adults say when they don't know yet," she said, and went back to her equations. Ethan looked at Olivia across the kitchen. Olivia pressed her lips together to keep the laugh from coming out at the wrong moment. That night, neither of them slept particularly well. Olivia knew because she heard him at 2 a.m, the soft sound of footsteps in the hallway, then the kitchen, then nothing. She lay in her bed for 10 minutes, telling herself it wasn't her business, and then she got up because she had stopped pretending with herself around day 6 of this whole situation. She found him at the kitchen table with a glass of water, and his phone, not looking at the phone, just sitting with it in his hand, the way people hold things when they need something solid. He looked up when she came in. He didn't look surprised. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "I know," she said. "I heard you." She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "Talk to me." "I keep thinking about the car," he said. "About what he was doing. Whether he was just trying to rattle us, or whether he was looking at the house, at the exits, at Sophie's window." His jaw tightened. "I keep running the math on what a man like that does when he's cornered." "Laura says cornered men go one of 2 ways," Olivia said. "They lawyer up and go quiet, or they do something stupid." "I know which way Marsh goes," Ethan said. "So do I." She leaned forward on the table. "Which is why you're not going to sit here at 2 a.m. catastrophizing alone. That's what he wants. He wants you awake and scared and making decisions from fear." She held his gaze. "Don't give him that." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "You know what I keep thinking about," he said. "That night I knocked on your door. How close I was to just walking past. How I almost kept going." He shook his head. "If I had kept walking." "But you didn't," she said. "The light," he said. "You had the light on." "I always have the light on." "I know." Something moved through his expression, deep and slow, like something surfacing after a long time underwater. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me say it without deflecting it, because I know that's what you do when something comes too close." She stiffened, just slightly. "Ethan." "You deflect," he said. "Not unkindly, just true. Someone says something real to you and you redirect it. You make a joke, you go practical. You did it the night I told you Marcus was an idiot. You did it when I told you what Sophie said about wanting to stay. You make yourself smaller than the moment, and then you walk away from it. And I think you've been doing that for so long, you don't notice anymore." The kitchen was very quiet. She didn't say anything. "I'm in love with you," he said. Quiet and direct and completely without performance. Not the grateful kind. Not the, "it's been a hard year and you were kind." The real kind. The kind where I wake up and my first thought is, you, and my last thought is you, and every single thing in between. He set his phone down on the table. "I'm 36 years old, and I have a 7-year-old daughter and a fraud case against a man who drove past your house tonight, and my life is genuinely a mess. I know that. But I'm in love with you, and you deserve to hear it said out loud." Olivia sat very still. She thought about 34 years. She thought about Marcus and the ones before Marcus, and the way people looked at her and looked away. She thought about every morning she had woken up in this house alone and told herself the quiet was fine. The quiet was good. The quiet was hers. She thought about Sophie at the kitchen table with her pencil and her equations unflinching. I'm terrified, she said. Her voice was steady but just barely. I know, he said. I don't have a good track record with this. Neither do I. He held her gaze. I'm not asking you to not be scared. I'm asking you to be scared and do it anyway. She breathed. In, out. Okay, she said. Okay, you heard me? Or okay? Okay, she said again, firmer. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Okay. The kitchen was quiet. The furnace hummed. Outside, Cedar Falls was dark and cold and completely ordinary. And inside this small house, something shifted into a new position that would not shift back. She was still holding his hand when her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Laura. At 2:18 in the morning. That was the first wrong thing. She reached for it with her free hand and read it. Then she read it again. Ethan, she said. Something in her voice made him reach across and take the phone from her hand. He read the text. His face went completely still. The text said, Called by the DA's office tonight. Marsh's attorney contacted them at 10 p.m. Marsh is claiming he has evidence that Ethan Walker committed insurance fraud related to the company collapse. He says he has documentation. I don't know what this is yet. Could be fabricated, could be something. Do not panic. Call me at 7 a.m. Ethan set the phone down on the table. Insurance fraud, he said. Laura says it could be fabricated. It could be. His voice was completely flat. He was staring at the table. Or it could be something Marsh built while I wasn't looking. The same way he built the rest of it. He pressed his hand over his mouth. I was not Olivia. I was not paying attention for a long time after Rebecca. I signed things. I didn't read them the way I should have. I trusted him with the books because I couldn't. He stopped. What if he found something? What if he built something into the records that looks like me? What if I signed something I didn't understand? Stop, she said. Not harsh, precise. Stop running toward the worst version of the story. That's what he wants. He filed this at 10 at night, the same day the DA moved on him. He's panicking and throwing everything at the wall. What if something sticks? Then Laura handles it, she said. But we don't know what it is yet. We don't know if it's real. And we are not making decisions at 2 in the morning based on what Daniel Marsh is claiming. She looked at him hard. You told me not to give him the fear. Don't give him yours either. He looked at her. A long, searching look. Then he exhaled one long breath, and something in his posture came down from the ledge it had climbed to. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. I hate this, he said. I know you do. She squeezed his hand. Go back to bed. 7 o'clock is 4.5 hours away. He went. She sat in the kitchen alone for a while, with the lights low and the house breathing around her, and she thought about what Marsh was doing. Building a counter-narrative. Trying to muddy the water before the DAA could act cleanly. It was the move of a man who understood that if he couldn't win the next best outcome, was creating enough confusion that the truth became disputable. She picked up her laptop from the counter where she'd left it that afternoon. She opened it. She went back to the same county records databases she'd been in before, and she started looking not for what she already knew, but for what she didn't. She looked for Marsh's financial activity in the 18 months before the company collapsed. She looked for the names he was connected to. She found Garrett Bloom again, the name from the email chain, and she started pulling on that thread. She worked until 5:30 in the morning. At 5:45, she made coffee. At 6, she heard Sophie upstairs, the small sounds of a child waking up on her own schedule, feet on the floor, Gerald presumably being repositioned. At 6:15, Sophie appeared in the kitchen doorway, sleep-rumpled and certain. You were up all night, Sophie said, not a question. Part of it, Olivia said. Because of the man in the car. Because of some things I needed to figure out, Olivia said. Sophie came to the table and climbed up into her chair. She looked at Olivia's laptop, at the documents spread beside it, at the coffee mug that had been refilled several times. She looked at Olivia's face. Did you figure it out? She asked. Most of it, Olivia said. Good. Sophie pulled Gerald onto her lap. What's for breakfast? Ethan came downstairs at 6:50, already dressed, already carrying the particular alertness of a man who had not slept much but had decided to be functional anyway. He looked at Olivia and at the materials on the table and stopped moving. You were up, he said. Most of the night. Olivia. Garrett Bloom, she said. The man Marsh was emailing. I pulled his business registration history. He runs 3 LLCs, 2 of which show Marsh as a silent partner. One of them filed articles of incorporation the same month your company collapsed. That LLC holds a contract for a commercial property development project in Jefferson County that should by all rights have been a project your company was positioned to bid on. Ethan stared at her. He didn't just steal from you, she said. He stole the business too. He tanked your company so he and Bloom could take the pipeline of work you'd built without competing against you for it. She turned the laptop toward him. It's all in the registration records. It's all public. Ethan sat down slowly. He looked at the screen. He looked at the documents. He looked at them the way you look at something when you're confirming a suspicion that has lived in you for so long it has become part of the furniture, and seeing it made real in black and white is not a surprise, but a different kind of pain. The pain of being right about something you wished you'd been wrong about. He burned my company to the ground, Ethan said, to take the clients. Yes, she said. The insurance fraud claim, Ethan said. His voice had gone very controlled. If there's documentation claiming I committed fraud, Marsh built it. It didn't exist until he needed it. That's what I think, she said. And now we have evidence of motive that goes beyond what Laura already has. He needed you gone. He needed you discredited and broke and too buried in the collapse to look up and see what he'd taken. Laura called at exactly 7. Olivia put her on speaker. The insurance fraud claim, Laura said without preamble. I've had 2 hours to look at what Marsh's attorney sent over. It's thin. It's very thin. He's pointing to a discrepancy in how a piece of equipment was valued on an insurance filing 18 months before the collapse. The discrepancy is $12,000, and it looks like a clerical error more than anything deliberate. A pause. It's not nothing, but it's not what he's selling it as. The DA's office is treating it as a delay tactic. It is a delay tactic, Olivia said. Laura, I found something. She laid out what she'd found about Bloom and the LLCs. She heard Laura go quiet on the other end, the focused building quiet of someone assembling a larger picture in real time. When Olivia finished, Laura said, How long did it take you to find this? About 4 hours. Another silence. I'm going to need everything you have. Send it to me in the next hour. A pause. Olivia, this changes the scope of what we're presenting. If Marsh and Bloom conspired to eliminate Walker as a competitor and then took his client pipeline, that's not just fraud against an individual. That's potentially a RICO matter. Ethan, who had been listening, said, What does that mean practically? It means, Laura said, that this just got a great deal bigger than a $40,000 civil claim. And it means that Daniel Marsh is not going to be sleeping well for a very long time. A pause. I need both of you in Boulder today. Can you come? They were in the car by 9. Sophie went to her friend Maya's house with an explanation that involved the word grown-up stuff, and Maya's mother, who had known Olivia for years, who asked no questions and offered cookies. The drive to Boulder took 2 hours. Ethan drove, and Olivia sat in the passenger seat with her printed documents organized in a folder on her lap. They didn't talk much. Not because there was nothing to say, but because the silence between them had changed quality. It wasn't the loaded silence of people who don't know each other, or the careful silence of people managing what they reveal. It was the silence of people who have said the important things and are resting in the space after. Halfway there, Ethan reached over without looking away from the road and covered her hand with his on the center console. She turned her hand palm up and laced her fingers through his. He didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. They drove. Laura's office was on the fourth floor of a building in downtown Boulder that smelled like good coffee and the particular kind of serious money that doesn't need to announce itself. She met them at the elevator and walked them into a conference room where a man in his 50s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead was already seated. "This is Jim Hartman," Laura said, "Deputy DA." Hartman stood, shook hands with Ethan, shook hands with Olivia, and looked at the folder she was carrying with the direct interest of a man who had learned to tell the difference between people who had things and people who thought they had things. "Ms. Bennett," he said, "Laura tells me you're the one who found the LLC filing." "Yes," she said. "And the Bloom connection." "Yes." He looked at her for a moment. "What do you do for work?" "I own a bakery," she said. Something moved through his expression. Almost amusement. Almost respect. "Okay," he said. "Let's see what you've got." They laid everything out on the conference table. Every document, every filing, every email from the boxes Ethan had brought from Denver, the Bloom registrations, the timeline Olivia had built, showing the sequence of events in the months before the collapse. Hartman went through it systematically, occasionally asking a question, occasionally writing something on the legal pad in front of him, occasionally looking at Olivia with that same expression she couldn't quite name. 2 hours in, he sat back in his chair, took off his reading glasses and pressed them between his thumb and forefinger. "Mr. Walker," he said, "I want you to understand something. What happened to you was not a business failure. It was a targeted criminal conspiracy conducted by at least 2 people who used your personal circumstances, your grief, your distraction, your trust as a weapon against you." He paused. "We intend to treat it as such." The room was quiet. Ethan's jaw moved, just once. "Okay," he said. "The insurance fraud allegation Marsh raised last night," Hartman continued, "is in my assessment a fabrication intended to create moral equivalence where none exists. We are not going to treat it as credible, and I'm advising Marsh's attorney of that position this afternoon." He looked at Olivia. "The Bloom connection you found last night may open additional avenues that extend well beyond the original scope. My office is going to need to run that down fully before I can say more." "What happens now?" Ethan asked. "Now?" Hartman said, "We move. We've been building this carefully because we wanted to be sure. What you brought us today means we're sure." He set his glasses on the table. "Marsh is going to be arrested, probably within 72 hours. I can't give you an exact timeline, but I can tell you it is not far." Ethan was very still. 72 hours, he said. "Approximately." "And Sophie?" He stopped himself. "My daughter. Is she safe in the interim?" Hartman looked at him directly. "The car outside your residence last night was a rental. We ran the plate. It was rented under a name connected to Bloom's organization. That is now part of our active file. I've already spoken with the Cedar Falls PD, and there will be a patrol in your area." He paused. "And Mr. Walker, in my experience, when men like Marsh realize the walls are closing, they don't go after children. They run." "And if he's not that kind of man," Ethan said, "then we have people watching him," Hartman said. "Trust the process. You've done your part." They drove back to Cedar Falls in the late afternoon, the light going low and golden the way it did in Colorado in winter, turning everything it touched into something more than it was. Ethan was quiet for the long time. Not a troubled quiet. A processing quiet, the kind that needed space. And she gave it to him. 20 miles outside Cedar Falls, he said, "I need to tell Sophie something tonight. Not everything, but something. She's old enough to know that a situation she's been living inside of is moving toward being over." "What are you going to tell her?" Olivia asked. "The truth," he said. "Kid-sized, but the truth. That a man who did something wrong to our family is being held accountable, and that it happened because we had help." He looked over at her briefly. "Because you helped. You would have gotten there," she said. "Maybe," he said. "Not the same way, not as fast." He turned back to the road. "Sophie asked me something last week. She asked me why I knocked on your door that night, out of all the houses on that street. Olivia turned to look at him. "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth," he said. "I told her you had a light on." He paused. She thought about it for a second, and then she said, "I think it was Mom." His voice changed on the last word, not breaking, but bending the way strong things bend under enough weight. "She said she thinks her mom sent us there." The car was very quiet. "What did you say to that?" Olivia asked softly. "I said, I think she might be right," Ethan said. Olivia looked at the road ahead, at the light on the mountains going amber and rose. She thought about a woman named Rebecca who walked into parties and knew everyone's name, who made people feel like the world was bigger than it was. She thought about what it meant that this man and this child had ended up on her street at her door in her kitchen. She thought about the light she always kept burning. "She sounds like she was extraordinary," Olivia said. "She was," Ethan said. "She would have liked you. That's not something I say lightly." He paused. "She would have shown up at your bakery every single morning and ordered things she didn't need, and left you reviews that were embarrassingly enthusiastic." Olivia laughed. A real one surprised out of her. "She would have told Sophie you were her person," he said quieter. "That's the word she used for the people who mattered. She'd point someone out and say that one's a real person, Soph, a real one." He exhaled. "She'd have said that about you on day one." Olivia didn't trust her voice for a moment. "I would have liked her," she said finally. "I know," he said. They picked up Sophie from Maya's house at 5:30. Sophie burst out of the front door before they'd fully stopped Gerald under her arm and launched herself at Ethan with the complete physical confidence of a child who is absolutely certain she will be caught. He caught her. He held her for a moment longer than usual. Sophie pulled back and looked at his face with those careful, evaluating eyes. "Is it over?" she asked. "Almost," he said. She looked at Olivia over his shoulder. "Did Olivia fix it?" "Olivia found what we needed," Ethan said. "And some very serious people are taking it from here." Sophie considered this. She seemed to find it acceptable. She wriggled down and took Olivia's hand on one side and Ethan's on the other, and walked to the car between them, as if this arrangement was not new, as if it had always been the shape of things. At dinner that night, Ethan told Sophie what he'd said. He would the truth simplified, honest. He told her that a man had done something wrong to their family a long time ago. He told her that this man had taken advantage of a time when Ethan was very sad and not paying attention. He told her that because of the documents they'd found, and because of a lawyer named Laura, and because of Olivia, that man was going to face consequences. Sophie listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Does that mean we're not in trouble anymore?" she asked. "We're not in trouble anymore," Ethan said. Sophie nodded once. She looked at Olivia. "Can we get a dog?" The kitchen erupted. Ethan's expression went from solemn to completely undone. Olivia pressed her hand over her mouth. Sophie looked between them with the baffled dignity of someone who has asked a perfectly reasonable question. "We don't even have a house right now, Sophie," Ethan managed. "We have this house," Sophie said. The sentence landed in the kitchen and stayed there. Ethan looked at Olivia. Olivia looked at Ethan. Butterscotch from the counter looked at all of them with the detached authority of a cat who has already decided how this ends. "Let's talk about the dog later," Olivia said carefully. "Okay," Sophie said. She picked up her fork. "But I want a golden one. I already named him." "You—" Ethan pressed his hand to his forehead. "What did you name him?" "Biscuit," Sophie said. "Because Olivia makes biscuits, and he can be named after them." Olivia looked at this 7-year-old child who had, in the space of 17 days, rearranged the furniture of her entire life, and she felt something settle into place inside her with the quiet finality of something that was done moving and had arrived. "Biscuit," she said. "That's a good name." Ethan looked at her with everything he'd said at 2 a.m. still in his eyes, plus something new, something that understood. They were building something here. The three of them in the ordinary, extraordinary space of a kitchen in Colorado. Something that had started with a fist through a wall and a man walking into a snowstorm and a light left burning in a window. "Yeah," he said, looking at her. Only at her. "That's a good name." That night, Laura called at 9:47. Olivia was in the sunroom. Ethan answered his phone in the hallway, and she heard his voice change the single shift in register that told her something had happened before he said a word. He appeared in the sunroom doorway 15 seconds later. "They moved up the timeline," he said. His voice was steady and completely controlled. "Marsh tried to leave Colorado this afternoon. Booked a flight to Mexico. The DA's office had a flag on his travel." He paused. "They arrested him at Denver International at 6:15 tonight." Olivia stared at him. "It's done," Ethan said. "He's in custody." She stood up from the wicker chair. She crossed the room and stopped in front of him. She looked at his face, the face of a man who has been bracing for impact for 3 years and just felt the ground stop shaking. "It's done," she repeated. "It's done." His voice broke on the second word. Just slightly. Just enough. He put his arms around her and held on, and she put her arms around him and held back, and they stood in the sunroom of her small house in Cedar Falls, while the truth they'd spent 3 weeks building finally came home to rest. Outside, Colorado was cold and dark and indifferent and beautiful. Inside, the light was on in every room. It had always been on. That was the thing about Olivia Bennett that Daniel Marsh had never understood, that Marcus before him had never understood, that the whole long history of people looking past her had never understood. She didn't keep the light on for herself. She kept it on because she had always known somewhere deep and certain and unshakable that someone was going to need it. She'd just been waiting to find out who. Now she knew. The morning after Daniel Marsh was arrested, Olivia woke up and lay in her bed for 3 full minutes doing nothing. Not reviewing receipts in her head. Not making mental lists. Not running through the next 12 hours of bakery prep or school pickup schedules, or the stack of documents still sitting on her kitchen table. She just lay there, in the quiet of her own house, and let the silence be what it was, not empty, not lonely, but full in the particular way that only comes after something hard has finally ended. Then she got up and went downstairs and found Ethan already in the kitchen. He was making pancakes, actually making them from scratch flour on the counter, the good pan on the stove. Sophie sitting on the counter beside him with Gerald in her lap, providing what appeared to be quality control commentary on the batter consistency. "You're doing too many," Sophie said. "You can never do too many pancakes," Ethan said. "Butterscotch doesn't eat pancakes. Butterscotch is not invited to breakfast. He's going to be very sad about that." Olivia stood in the kitchen doorway and watched the two of them and felt something move through her chest that was so large and so quiet she almost couldn't hold it. Like trying to hold water in your hands. Not something you could grip, only something you could feel while it was there. Ethan looked up. He saw her face, and he smiled. Not the careful, managed expression she'd seen on him in those first days. Not the controlled version of himself he wore like armor, but a real one, loose and unhurried and fully his. "Pancakes," he said. "I can see that," she said. "Sophie is supervising." "I'm supervising," Sophie confirmed. Olivia went to the coffee maker. "How'd you sleep?" she asked. "Like a man whose problem just got arrested at Denver International," Ethan said. Sophie looked between them. "Is that good sleep or bad sleep?" "Best sleep," Ethan said. "In 3 years." Laura called at 8:45. Ethan put her on speaker without being asked, because that was what they did. Now they didn't manage information separately, they heard things together. "Marsh is being held without bail pending arraignment," Laura said. "His attorney is already trying to negotiate, but the DA is not interested in negotiating, not with the scope of what we've presented." A pause. "Bloom was contacted by federal investigators yesterday evening. He's cooperating, which means Marsh's position just got significantly worse." Another pause. "Ethan, I want you to understand what this means financially. The assets Marsh and Bloom accumulated through the Jefferson County project, the one that should have been yours, are going to be subject to a civil recovery action that runs parallel to the criminal case. I'm filing the paperwork this week. You're not going to get everything back, but you're going to get substantially more than nothing." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Sophie had gone very still on the counter, reading the room the way she always did. "How substantial?" he asked. "Early estimate," Laura said, "with the fraudulent transfer recovery and the damages calculation somewhere between $200,000 and $250,000. Possibly more, depending on how Bloom's cooperation shakes out." She paused. "This is going to take time to resolve completely. But Ethan, you're going to be okay. Financially. Actually, okay." The kitchen was so quiet, Olivia could hear the pancakes on the griddle. Sophie slid off the counter. She walked to her father and took his hand and held it with both of hers, the way small children hold things they want to protect. She didn't say anything. She just held on. Ethan's hand closed around hers. "Thank you, Laura," Olivia said. "Thank yourself," Laura said. "I keep saying it. You found the thread." A pause. "Call me if anything comes up. And Olivia, I want a cake. A real one, not as payment. Just because I want one." "Name the flavor," Olivia said. "Surprise me," Laura said. "You're good at that." And she hung up. No one in the kitchen spoke for a moment. Then Sophie looked up at her father with those serious measuring eyes and said, "Are we rich now?" Ethan made a sound that was half laugh and half something rawer. "No, baby. We're okay. There's a difference." "Is okay good?" "Okay is really, really good," he said. Sophie nodded, apparently finding this satisfactory. She looked at the stove. "The pancakes are burning," she said. They were. Slightly. Ethan turned back to the stove with a word Olivia chose not to acknowledge, and Sophie climbed back onto the counter, and the morning continued, and it was so ordinary and so complete that Olivia had to turn toward the window for a moment to compose herself. 2 weeks after the arrest, the people of Cedar Falls found out. It happened the way things always happened in small towns. Not all at once, not through any official channel, but through the particular social osmosis of a community where everyone knew someone who knew someone. The story moved through the coffee shop on Main and the hardware store on 4th, and the elementary school pickup line with the speed and thoroughness of a thing that had been waiting to be said. What surprised Olivia was not that people talked. What surprised her was what they said. Karen Dobbs, whose mother Shirley had gotten the retirement cake with the gold lettering, stopped Olivia outside the bakery on a Tuesday morning and grabbed both her hands. "I heard what you did," she said. "What you found. How you helped him." She shook her head. "You're a good woman, Olivia Bennett. You always have been. Some of us just took too long to say so." Olivia didn't know what to do with that, so she thanked her and went inside and stood behind the counter for a moment before she could trust herself to start the morning prep. Carla, who had been watching from the back, said simply, "It's about time." Olivia looked at her. "What is—" "People seeing you," Carla said. "The way you actually are." She went back to the ovens. "I've been watching it for 4 years. Took a man knocking on your door in a snowstorm to make it happen." Olivia picked up a spatula. "Has anyone ever told you that you're very direct?" "Every day," Carla said cheerfully. "And I'm always right." The real shift happened on a Friday afternoon 3 weeks after the arrest, when Sophie Walker walked into Olivia's bakery after school, set her backpack on the floor, climbed up onto a stool at the prep counter and said, "I want to learn how to make something." Olivia looked at her. "What do you want to make?" Sophie thought about it with the gravity she brought to all important decisions. "Something that smells good," she said finally, "and that I could give to someone as a present. Not from a box. A real one." "A real one," Olivia said. "Yeah, that takes a while and you have to pay attention." Olivia untied her apron and retied it. She pulled out a second smaller apron from the hook by the door, one she'd bought months ago without fully examining why a plain white one that could be folded up to fit someone considerably smaller than her. She held it out to Sophie. Then let's make something real, she said. Sophie slid off the stool and let Olivia tie the apron around her waist. She held her arms out to her sides to look at it and then dropped them with a decisive nod. Okay, she said. What do we start with? Washing your hands, Olivia said. That's boring. That's baking, Olivia said. Sophie washed her hands. They made snickerdoodles. Olivia walked her through every step, measuring, mixing the way you had to feel when the dough was right, the way you rolled each ball between your palms, the cinnamon sugar coating that Sophie applied with such concentrated focus, it was almost meditative. They put the first tray in the oven, and Sophie sat on the stool and watched the oven window, like she was waiting for something important. Olivia, she said without looking away from the oven. Yeah, are you and my dad going to get married? Olivia set down the bowl she was washing, very carefully. That is a very big question, she said. I know. Sophie was still watching the oven. Maya's mom says people take a long time to decide things like that. Maya's mom is right. But Maya's mom also thought the science fair was on Thursday, and it was on Wednesday, so. Sophie shrugged. She's not always right. Olivia pressed her lips together. Your dad and we're figuring things out, she said. One step at a time. Sophie finally looked at her, direct and calm and completely certain. I already decided, she said. Did you? I decided the first night, when you gave me the hot chocolate with the marshmallows. She turned back to the oven. You didn't have to do the marshmallows, but you did. That's how I knew. Olivia looked at this 7-year-old child and thought nothing in my life prepared me for you. And also, I am so glad you exist. The marshmallows are important, Olivia managed. They really are, Sophie agreed. The timer went off. The snickerdoodles were perfect. Ethan arrived at the bakery at 5:30 to pick Sophie up, and Sophie met him at the door with a paper bag held at arm's length like an offering. I made these, she said. By myself. Well, Olivia helped, but I did the rolling. Ethan took the bag. He looked inside. He looked at Olivia over Sophie's head with an expression that was so full of so many things she could spend a week taking it apart and still not find the bottom of it. These look incredible, he said. They are, Sophie said. I tasted the dough. You're not supposed to taste the dough. Olivia, let me taste the dough. Ethan looked at Olivia. You let her taste the dough. A very small amount, Olivia said. It was a medium amount, Sophie said. Ethan shook his head. He was smiling so completely and effortlessly, it transformed his whole face, the face she had first seen on her porch, broken and bleeding and carrying 3 years of exhaustion. Now just a man standing in a bakery with flour on his daughter's apron and a bag of snickerdoodles, and a life that was slowly, imperfectly, stubbornly reassembling itself into something worth having. Then, on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after Daniel Marsh's arrest, the twist that nobody in Cedar Falls had seen coming appeared on Olivia's phone at 7:43 in the form of a text from Laura Chen. It said, Bloom gave them everything. There is a third partner, someone local Cedar Falls, helped Marsh route the money through local accounts to obscure the transfers. The DA is not releasing the name yet, but I know who it is. Call me immediately. Olivia read it twice. She called Laura. Who? She said before Laura could speak. Ray Coulter, Laura said. The name landed like cold water. Ray Coulter owned Cedar Falls First Bank. He had been the bank where Ethan's company kept its business accounts. He had sat on the town council for 11 years. He had shaken Ethan's hand at the firefighters' benefit 3 years ago. Olivia was almost certain she had a photograph somewhere of that event. She'd taken photos for the town newsletter. He processed the transfers, Laura said. Helped structure the account activity to make it look like normal business expenses. The DA has records from Bloom that show Coulter received a fee arrangement he was paid for access. A pause. Ethan needs to know immediately, and you both need to know that Coulter is aware that the DA is closing in. He has not been arrested yet. He's still in town, Olivia said. Yes. She thought about Ray Coulter at the bank. about the people in Cedar Falls who walked through his doors every day, who trusted him with their accounts, their mortgages, their savings. She thought about the 11 years on the town council, about how much a man like that could do with access and time and a community's trust. "Laura," she said, "does he know that Ethan is connected to Olivia Bennett? Does he know that I'm involved?" A pause, a significant one. Bloom would have known, which means Coulter likely knows. After she hung up, Olivia stood in the bakery for exactly 30 seconds. Then she called Ethan. He arrived in 8 minutes. She had never seen him move through her door quite that fast. She told him. She watched his face go through it, the name, the recognition, the sequence of understanding as the picture completed itself. Ray Coulter, the local banker, the community pillar. "He knew us," Ethan said. It was barely above a whisper. "He knew Rebecca. He came to the funeral." His voice had gone completely flat. "He shook my hand at her funeral." Olivia didn't say anything. There was nothing adequate to say. "He helped Marsh take everything," Ethan said. "While I was burying my wife, he helped him." The controlled fury was back colder than she'd ever seen it. "And then he shook my hand." "He's going to be arrested," she said. "Laura says the DA is moving today." "Today," Ethan repeated. "Today." He stood in the middle of her bakery with his fists at his sides and his jaw set, and his eyes locked on something she couldn't see. And she let him have that moment because it was his, and he had earned it every second of it. Then he exhaled. One long, deliberate breath. And he looked at her. "Are you okay?" he asked. She blinked. Of all the things she'd expected him to say. "I'm fine. Ethan, you just found out that—" "I know what I just found out," he said. "I'm asking about you. This is your town. Coulter is someone you've dealt with for years. Your bakery account is at his bank." He held her gaze. "Are you okay?" She looked at him. This man who 6 weeks ago had appeared on her porch bleeding and broken, and barely holding together, asking first about her. "I'm angry," she said honestly, "and I'm fine." "Good," he said. "Angry is the right answer." Ray Coulter was arrested at 11:42 that morning at Cedar Falls First Bank. Olivia heard about it from Carla, who heard about it from the woman who ran the coffee shop next door, who had watched 3 plainclothes officers walk in through the front entrance and come out 20 minutes later with Coulter in between them. No drama. No shouting. The quiet, terrible efficiency of a thing that had finally caught up. The town reacted the way small towns always react to the exposure of a trusted institution, with shock, that was also underneath the particular relief of a truth that had been waiting to be acknowledged. People talked. People were angry. People went over every interaction with Coulter in their memories and tried to find the seams. And through all of it, Olivia kept the bakery open. She made things. She served people. She listened when they needed to talk about it and redirected when they spiraled. And she was the same steady, warm, certain presence she had always been. Except that now people saw it. Now they named it. Now the woman who had spent years being background finally stood in the foreground of her own story and let herself be seen there. On a Saturday morning in early March one day, before Ethan signed the lease on a small house 4 streets over from Olivia's, close enough that Sophie could walk between them, which was Sophie's stated primary requirement for any housing arrangement. Ethan came to the bakery before it opened. Olivia was alone in the back, the morning prep not yet started. Still in the particular quiet that belonged only to the hour before the work began. She heard the front door and came out, and he was standing in the middle of the empty shop with his coat still on, and his hands in his pockets, and the expression of a man who has rehearsed something and then decided in the doorway to throw it out. "I had a whole thing I was going to say," he said. "I figured," she said. "It was good too, well structured." "I believe you." "I'm not going to say it," he said. "I'm going to say the actual thing instead." She folded her arms and leaned against the counter and waited. "You have been the person," he said, Not a person, the person. Since the night I knocked on your door because I was broken and out of options, and your light was on." He stopped, started again. "You gave my daughter marshmallows at 2 in the morning. You sat in the boxes with me. You found the thread that unraveled everything. You stood in that house while a car sat outside, and you called the police, and you held my hand, and you did not flinch once." He looked at her directly. "Not once, Olivia. I was watching. You never flinched." She held his gaze. Her chest was doing something she'd stopped trying to contain. "I'm not asking you to upend your life," he said. "I'm asking you to let what's already happening keep happening. I'm asking you to let it be real." He pulled his hands out of his pockets. "I'm asking you to let me be the man who gets to stand in your bakery before it opens and tell you that you changed everything." The shop was quiet. The ovens were cold behind her, waiting for the morning to begin. "You know what Sophie told me yesterday," Olivia said. He waited. "She said she decided about me the first night, the marshmallows." She paused. "She said she already knew." Something moved through his face. Something that had Rebecca in it, and Sophie in it, and 3 years of carrying everything alone, and the night he'd put his fist through a wall and walked out into a snowstorm and ended up on her street because there was a light in a window, and something in him, something older and more certain than reason, had known to stop. "She gets that from her mother," he said, "knowing things early." "I'm starting to understand that," Olivia said. She unfolded her arms and stepped away from the counter. She crossed the empty bakery floor and stopped in front of him close enough that she had to look up to see his face. "I spent 34 years waiting to be chosen," she said. "Not in a sad way. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because it's true, and you asked me once for the real answer instead of the smart one." She looked at him steadily. "I used to think the problem was me. Too much, too big, too emotional, too present. And then you showed up, and you didn't treat any of those things like problems. You treated them like they were the whole point." His hands came up and held her face the way they had that night in the kitchen, careful and certain and deliberate. "They are the whole point," he said. She put her hand over his. She let herself stand there fully, without shrinking, without apologizing, without looking for the exit. "Okay," she said. The same word she'd used at 2 in the morning, the only word that had ever been big enough. He kissed her. In the empty bakery before the morning started, in the town where she'd spent years being invisible in the life she had built out of her grandmother's language and her own stubbornness and a light she'd kept burning without knowing exactly why. He kissed her, and she kissed him back, and neither of them was careful about it. When they separated, his forehead came down to rest against hers. They stood like that for a moment, breathing. "Sophie's going to say she knew," he said. "Sophie's going to be insufferable about this." Olivia agreed. He laughed, low and real and completely unguarded. The laugh she had first heard in her kitchen weeks ago, the one that had filled the room and gone up the stairs and settled around a sleeping child like something warm. This time it filled the bakery. This time it settled around both of them. 1 year later, Laura Chen's birthday cake sat in the center of the table at a dinner party in Boulder. 3 tiers, lemon and lavender, decorated with gold leaf, that Olivia had applied with a brush no wider than a pencil, and the slow patience of someone who understood that the most beautiful things required your full attention. Laura took one look at it and then looked at Olivia and said, "I'm keeping you on retainer." Daniel Marsh was convicted on 7 counts of wire fraud and conspiracy. Garrett Bloom, who had cooperated fully with federal investigators, received a reduced sentence. Ray Coulter resigned from the town council the morning of his arrest and did not fight the charges. The investigation he triggered once opened uncovered 3 additional cases of structured financial fraud in the county. The DA sent Olivia a handwritten note that said simply, "Thank you for finding the thread." She framed it. She hung it in the back of the bakery where she could see it from the prep counter. Not because she needed the validation. Because she wanted to remember that sometimes the most important thing a person can do is look carefully at what's in front of them and refuse to look away. Ethan went back to working, not firefighting. Not yet, but contracting again. Real work, building things, the kind of physical, purposeful labor that gave him back something he hadn't known he'd lost until he felt it return. He started coaching Sophie's soccer team in the fall. He showed up to every game and every practice and every school event with the focused, unhurried attention of a man who has stopped apologizing for being present. Sophie won the 4th grade math competition in April. She accepted her ribbon with the matter-of-fact composure of someone who had expected to win, shook her teacher's hand, and immediately looked into the crowd for Olivia, who was standing next to Ethan in the 3rd row, with her hands clasped in front of her, and tears she was absolutely not going to let fall. Sophie pointed at her and said loudly enough to be heard by the families in the surrounding rows, "She taught me that the answer is always in the numbers if you look long enough." Olivia did cry then. Just a little. She blamed it on the gymnasium lighting, and no one believed her, and she didn't care. On a Sunday morning in November, 1 year and 19 days after a drunk man knocked on her door in a snowstorm, Olivia stood in her kitchen, the kitchen that was hers, that had always been hers, that now held the sounds and the presence of people who belonged in it. And she made pancakes. Ethan sat at the table with the newspaper and his coffee. Sophie sat across from him with Gerald and a library book about marine biology, which was her current obsession. Butterscotch occupied the counter with the serene authority of a cat who has never once doubted his place in the order of things. The kitchen smelled like coffee and butter and the particular warmth of a Sunday that had nowhere it needed to be. Olivia stood at the stove and made pancakes and listened to Sophie explain at length and with great enthusiasm why the mantis shrimp was the most formidable creature in the ocean, and listened to Ethan ask questions that were genuinely interested and occasionally alarmed. And she thought about the woman who used to sit at this table alone at 2 in the morning with cold tea and receipts, and the quiet belief that this was enough, that this was her life, that this was what she got. That woman had not been wrong to survive. She had not been wrong to build her bakery and keep her light on and make her grandmother's recipes and fill her days with the honest work of feeding people. She had just been wrong about one thing. She had thought she was waiting for nothing. She had been waiting for this. The pancakes were ready. She slid them onto the plate and carried them to the table and set them down, and Sophie reached for the syrup without looking up from her book, and Ethan looked up from his newspaper and looked at her. Just looked the way he always looked, like she was both ordinary and astonishing in the same moment, and he had decided a long time ago to never stop noticing that. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she said. She sat down. She picked up her coffee. Outside, Colorado was cold and bright and enormous, and inside this small house in Cedar Falls, Olivia Bennett was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not invisible, not too much, not waiting anymore, but fully, completely, unmistakably home. And the light in the window burned on. It always would.